This has like a max of how much you can put on your total. This one is a new one. It's not there is on it. I guess I'll find out. No, because all the neighbors. The other day it was all about the neighbors. It was all the people who live next door to me. These are all the businesses. So there are as many.
Good morning, everyone. We still have a few members yet to show up, but we'll go ahead and get started. We do have a quorum. So we are going to take opponent testimony today. We will allow 8 minutes per conferee. Ms. Hanson will be the timekeeper. She'll hold up the manila folder when there's 1 minute left. And then I ask you to wrap up testimony after that. If you do have lengthy testimony and you're not familiar with giving testimony before the committee, I'd prefer that you didn't read it word for word. We have copies of it here. If you'd like to summarize it, if that helps, that would be great. So with that, I think I just want to point out for the committee that there is the fiscal note for the bill that everybody should have. That helps. Okay. Then we'll start with conferees, and our first one will be Swati with Advanced Power Alliance. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Swati. I represent the Advanced Power Alliance, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning to speak in opposition to House Bill 2273. Drawing your attention to my testimony, you'll see on the right-hand side of the front page document, this is the listing of the groups that are members of the Advanced Power Alliance. There are 36 members of our organization, which represent a very diverse cross-section of the world's leading industry companies. Most of these organizations on this listing have business interests in Kansas via operating wind farms and wind farms under development, purchase power agreements, headquarters or manufacturing facilities in the state. Trade Wind Energy, in fact, is one of our members. They are a tremendous local business success story. They're headquartered in Lenexa, developed by Shawnee Mission Northwest graduate, and they now employ 150 individuals. They were the fastest developer of wind in the country in 2017. Our assets span the entire state, from the most densely populated to the least, from the fastest growing communities in the state to, unfortunately, some of the most rapidly declining population communities. Since the first wind farm came on in the state, came on in 2001 in Kansas, we've invested more than $10 billion in assets. We've created more than 12,000 direct and indirect jobs. We have several more projects in the construction phase right now, representing more than $2 to $3 billion worth of new investments in the state. We also have Cloud County Community College and several other community colleges, but Cloud County has the first ever wind turbine technician program in the country with a 100% job placement rate. We stand before you today in strong opposition to House Bill 2273. So a little bit of background information. The first wind farm was sited in the state of Kansas in 2001 in Montezuma. And in the early 2000s, wind energy leasing continued throughout the state. In 2004, as Nick showed you the other day, the Wind Energy Task Force was created by the Kansas Energy Council, and it was assembled to discuss wind energy siting guidelines, where the wind projects should go, what do standard setbacks look like, things about what were discussed over the course of 18 months. With this Wind Energy Siting Task Force. In April of 2005, they completed the document, the Wind Energy Siting Handbook. I believe Nick showed this to you on Tuesday. This document served as the template, again, for all siting of wind farms in the state, and that template remains in use today, both by the counties and by the developers. Those baseline task force guidelines have been a tremendous resource, again, for the counties and for the developers themselves. That same year, Governor Kathleen Sebelius at the time, she moved forward with a creation of a box, the Heart of the Flint Hills box, and that essentially removed 16 counties in the heart of the Flint Hills, native intact prairie, world's last remaining vestiges of native intact prairie and said these 16 counties were off limits for wind farm development. There was also Wabaunsee County in that same year. They instituted a county ban on commercial wind development. There was a landowner that had his land leased, and he took that case all the way to the Kansas Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court upheld the county's ability to make that decision, to impose that countywide ban. Again, going back to the Flint Hills box, that same 16 counties Flint Hills box was expanded in May of 2011 by Governor Brownback and went from 16 counties to 33 counties. And so there is no commercial wind development within those 33 counties. Whether it's the part of the Flint Hills box, a county moratorium such as Wabaunsee County or McPherson County, which instituted its first moratorium in 2005. It was in place until 2017. It lifted it for 18 months, and then in October of this year, it reinstituted its county ban. We stand in support of county commission decision-making. Whether it's for moratorium, it's the county's prerogative, or in how they cite their projects, it's the county's prerogative, with input from landowners. How wind projects are cited, we have two developers here with you this morning, so I won't go into significant detail. You can ask them questions as well, but there are three key components that determine where a wind farm is sited in the state of Kansas. One, you have to have a great wind energy resource and land use compatibility. Two, you have to have community and landowner support. A project is not going to go where we don't have what amounts to generally hundreds of landowners that are signing on the dotted line voluntarily to have their land leased to support a wind farm. And then three, environmental impacts. So without either of those three elements, a wind farm will not be constructed in the state of Kansas. There's also some additional resources which I've listed as well in the testimony. So after a desktop analysis confirms the good wind potential as well as transmission interconnection, a developer approaches landowners to talk about leasing their land for a Met Tower, and that begins the process of 2 to 3 years worth of evaluation of wind speeds. 2 to 3 years. If the data looks positive, then the developer will begin continuing to work with additional landowners on potential leasing. The standard project takes 3 to 5 years to develop at least. And the county is informed, the landowners are informed all along that way. Half of the counties in Kansas are unzoned, and in those particular counties that are unzoned, there are still 3 points of interaction, 3 points of approval that a county must go through in order for a wind farm to come in. So in a zone county, you would have a conditional use process, and you would have the before planning and zoning, and then you would have the full county commission would go through and review or approve the project. And in the unzoned counties, you still have road maintenance agreements that have to be approved, payment road taxes agreements that have to be approved, and decommissioning must be approved by the county. So if at any point the county in an unzoned county does not approve either of those three documents, a wind farm is not going to move forward in that county. And then, of course, all along the way, there's still a host of state and federal permitting processes that the developers have to go through, including with the FAA, and all of those permits have to fall in line, again, in order for a wind farm to advance. So here are a few of the industry concerns with House Bill 2273. First of all, it ends the long-standing successful process of siting wind farms in Kansas, which gives deference to willing landowners and local county control. That's one of the first concerns. The second is general industry setbacks are around 1.1 to 1.5 times turbine tip height, TTH. And same for property lines, 3 to 4 times, around 1,500 feet. So those are general industry standards. Again, those were in the baseline siting template documents that were put together more than 15 years ago. But certainly, those are the baseline minimums. We always work with landowners and with the counties to make sure that whatever is within their prerogative is so in fact done. Wind companies spend considerable time and money on title search during the land leasing process.
Ms. White, I need a few seconds to
Is that
wrap
1
up.
minute? Okay. So, and then of course, when it comes to the ADL, the technology, FAA requirements, they go through, we have to be approved significantly through the FAA. Significant, when it comes to health effects, we have 18 years worth of data on operating wind farms in the state. Avian issues, we have developers that are here that can talk to you about how they handle avian issues. Property values, a report completed by Marius and Company, literally last week, surveyed all 21 county appraisers in the state of Kansas where wind farms are operating, and they determined that there was no market evidence to support a negative impact upon residential property values as a result of the development of and proximity to a wind farm. That is a direct quote from the report. And again, this is a survey of all 21 county appraisers from the 21 counties where there's operating wind farms. So I do want to draw your attention to a map that just talks about the setback distances. So if you have a landowner that owns 5 acres, and this is for the rural folks, if you have landowners that owns 5 acres in your community, and this is in your testimony, if they decide to put in a local park or allow for walk-in hunting, they would control 4,521 acres. Well, they can
Okay,
make the
that's
determination.
why I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Just wanted to draw your attention to it. Thank you. We're happy to stand for questions that whenever.
We'll have questions at the end after all the opponents have spoken. And I forgot to mention that I'm not Joe Seiwert, Representative Seiwert. He's unfortunately at another meeting, and he hopefully will be here in about an hour or so, but I'll be chairing in his absence until then. So our next opponent is Rob Stuper, NL Green Power.
Yep.
Welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to provide testimony this morning regarding House Bill 2273. My name is Rob Stupar, and I am the Manager of Regulatory and Institutional Affairs for NL Green Power, and I am responsible for the Midwest region, which includes Kansas. I provided written testimony, which you should have in opposition, which you should have a copy of, but I wanted to emphasize a few points from that testimony today. First, background on the company. Enel Green Power is the renewable energies division of the Enel Group, which is one of the largest utility companies in the world. It has investments in over 30 companies in all forms of energy generation. In the United States, Enel Green Power operates as an independent power producer with over 100 wind, solar, geothermal, and small hydro facilities across 24 states. The second point, Enel Green Power has made significant investment in the state of Kansas. The company operates 7 wind farms across Grant, Haskell, Clark, Lincoln, Ellsworth, Marion, and Elk counties, representing 1.4 gigawatts of generating capacity, which is enough to power roughly 500,000 homes on an annual basis. This investment represents a quarter of the total investment that Enel has made in North America by generating capacity, and represents a capital investment of $2.1 billion. Third point I'd like to make is that Enel Green Power chose to invest in Kansas not only because of its great wind resource, but because of its stable regulatory environment. Over the past decade, Enel Green Power has worked with its Lenexa-based development partner, the aforementioned Trade One Energy, to develop projects throughout the state. When we develop projects, we work in close coordination with county officials and county stakeholders to develop the projects in ways that meet the needs of the communities in which we invest. When we invest in an area, we become members of that community for the next 20 plus years, and we take that role seriously. We invest in several different partnerships in coordination with the community based on their needs, such as in workforce development, in emergency response, and in education. Some examples, we provided upgraded emergency response equipment in several of the communities in which we operate to upgrade their facilities so that they're able to not only help service our plants, but improve their coverage for their community. We provide scholarships at Cloud County Community College for jobs so that they can graduate in wind technician degrees to be able to work in the workforce from there. Finally, I'd like to say that we would like to continue to invest in Kansas, but legislation like House Bill 2273 would make it impossible for us to do so. And I want to highlight a few parts of the bill that are most troubling from our perspective. The 1.5 to 3 mile turbine setback language greatly exceeds industry standards and would effectively prohibit wind development in the state. Our GIS team is working on a map that would show the area, based upon the current language, would show areas where we're able to develop, and that area is very small. Several of our 7 projects that are currently built would not have been able to be built if this was law. The definition of residential property and airports in the definition section of the bill are very vague and broadly can be broadly interpreted for individuals that want to create airports that are not intended for flight, but just used to block development. The proposed county permitting process also infringes upon the rights of property rights of landowners, allowing adjacent counties within the setback area, the arbitrary setback area, to have standing to tell what private property owners in other counties can do, and it violates those property owners' ability to use their land. And then finally, the requirements to provide written notice to every property within the setback, the 3 mile radius setback area, is onerous and infeasible in some instances, and would be prohibitively expensive to be able to do that in the manner outlined in the bill. In closing, Enel plans to invest roughly $1 billion per year over the next few years in North America in wind, solar, and energy storage projects. We would love to be able to invest more in the state of Kansas, but passage of House Bill 2273 would make it impossible to do so and signal to us in the industry that Kansas is not open to business for the industry. I would like to thank you for the time and the ability to provide comments, and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stupar. Our next conferee is Adrian Harrell with Pratt Wind LLC. Welcome to the committee.
Vice Chairman, Ranking Minority Member, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today in opposition to House Bill 2273. My name is Adrian Harrell. I'm the wind site manager for Pratt Wind LLC, which is a 243 megawatt wind site in Pratt County. I'm also currently elected member to the Kingman City Commission. I come before you today to share my story in hopes that you will see how detrimental a legislative measure like House Bill 2273 would be for rural Kansans. I am a lifelong Kansan, born and raised. I graduated from Kingman High School back in 2002, and immediately following started my career in the military. I served in both Iraq and Afghanistan as an airborne infantryman with 82nd Airborne Division. And following my time in the Army, I served as a contractor for the Department of State's High Threat Protection Program in Afghanistan for another 4 years. After 12 years service to the country, multiple deployments, many years away from my family, it was time to come home. I started and ran my own businesses for a few years, but eventually decided it was time that I find a career, something that I could possibly retire from one day. Having a wife and 4 children, I knew I needed something that paid well and would provide the benefits that a growing family needs. The problem was, as many of you know, that can be awfully hard to find in much of our rural communities. At the time, affiliated NextEra Energy Resources, a company that I'd never heard of before, was building a wind project in Kingman County. So I drove out to the construction site, found the manager, and was hired on as a wind technician. Since then, I've worked as a wind technician, was promoted to associate wind site manager and wind site manager for 3 different NextEra Energy Resources affiliated wind sites in Kansas. All the while, I've been able to continue living in my same small town that I love. My kids have stayed in the same schools. been able to stay close to our families. The opportunities that the wind industry in Kansas has given me are countless. I feel truly blessed to be able to wake up in my hometown every morning and go to work providing Kansas with clean, low-cost renewable energy. Many of my friends and family members are farmers in rural Kansas. The wind industry has provided many Kansas farmers with much-needed stability. Through the wind industry, farmers and landowners in Kansas are capitalizing on the opportunity to receive steady, long-term payments for use of their land, which serves as a crucial component to keeping families, farms in business. Sun, rain, drought, or frost, Kansas wind will keep blowing. If enacted, House Bill 2273 would deprive Kansas landowners of this opportunity, and in many cases take away the one thing that could save the family farm. Another topic that I get asked about a lot is the possible impact that wind turbines have on our avian friends. As wind site operators, we frequently hire third-party environmental specialists to come out and do surveys of the entire wind sites, to look for any impacts that they may have on avians or any other animals for that matter. Every time our technicians go to the wind turbines, they do a series of searches at different distances around the turbines, looking for any possible avian strikes or other animals in the area. If that is found, they're required to photographically document and report it immediately. As you consider House Bill 2273, please take into consideration not only my story, but the stories of so many Kansans that have benefited from the wind industry. Whether that benefit derived from careers that have been provided, the incredible economic impact to our rural communities, or the family farms that have been saved. Enacting this legislation would be an incredible disservice to Kansas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell. And our next conferee is Mr. Spencer Jenkins with NextEra Energy Resources. Welcome to the committee.
Vice Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of NextEra Energy Resources. My name is Spencer Jenkins, and I'm a developer here in Kansas. I focus primarily in the state of Kansas and all the development actions here. So my testimony walks through the amount of investment that is made in Kansas through wind development. It also walks through the partnership between ourselves, the developer, and the landowner, and the payments that are made to the landowners. From there, I kind of walk through the setbacks that are included and how those items would prohibit either investment through wind and also the partnership with the landowners. So some background on NextEra Energy Resources. We own and operate 120 different sites in 21 states. In Kansas, we own and operate 7 projects. The most recent, Pratt Wind, was just built in December of 2018. Our first project, Perry County, was built in 2001. In total, we've invested nearly $2 billion in the state of Kansas. The partnership that I mentioned earlier that is between ourselves, the developer, and those that own the ground, the landowner, is critical to the development of wind energy. On an annual basis, we pay out $8.5 million in land payments to these landowners. Our most recent project, Pratt, that I discussed, that will contribute $1.5 million annually to the local landowners in Pratt County. It's also important to note that with the setbacks included in the bill, and the language in there as well, not 1 or 7 operational projects would have been built. Further, I'd like to discuss the airport provision that is included. This is a very common tactic that we have seen across the country. We commonly refer to this tactic as the shamport item. The sham here is that individuals who have no intention of owning or operating an aircraft or owning and operating an airfield can falsely claim that they have an airstrip, and in doing so, say, burdensome setback on all their neighbors within miles of where they're claiming to have an airport. Of course, also, the sham is that there's no FAA regulation. It's purely someone making a claim. And also, they're diluting the real meaning of an airstrip for local businesses that rely on the status of having an airstrip, such as sprayers and commercial airports. I'd also now like to walk through the illustration that I've provided. This illustration walks through the setback process and how we eventually arrive at what we call the turbine array, which is the final design of the wind farm and the location of the individual turbines. The first slide, I highlight landowner participation. The parcels in green are landowners that have signed an easement agreement with ourselves. Again, they own the land, we're merely leasing. The next slide shows setbacks from residents. In this example, the setback is 2,500 feet. As you can see, a lot of ground is removed. Moving on, these are setbacks from non-participating property. From there, we go on to our other setbacks, which include environmental factors, utility crossings, exclusion areas that are described by the county, and so on. And then finally, we get to the last slide, which includes the turbine array, the individual turbine locations. And you can see here that there's really not much ground left at the end of the development. Once all setbacks are included in our analysis, the amount of ground available for turbine placement is drastically reduced. This example would have never been possible with the setbacks that are included in House Bill 2273. One more item, and she's not here this morning, but I would like to reference the testimony of Glenna Moorhope of Pratt County. She's a county commissioner who has firsthand experience of not just having one, but 2 wind projects built in her county. I will make point of her first paragraph on the second page of her testimony, where she discusses the walk-in hunting in her area, and speaks that the setbacks included in the bill, it doesn't really make sense, as those areas are changing on an annual basis, and it's hard to ascribe a setback to something that changes every year. Not only one setback that's extremely restrictive on landowners and the right to earn income off their ground. Another item I would like to cover is the fact that we know that not every landowner or homeowner is willing to participate. We understand, and we go out of our way with each of our projects to address the concerns of those in the area that oppose projects. We hold open house events for the public. We also hold private meetings with members of the opposition, so we can hear their concerns and change the design of our project to accommodate them as best we can. Again, I thank you for your time, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Our next conferee is Dorothy Barnett with the Climate and Energy Project. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm in a unique position as the director of the Climate and Energy Project, an organization that's been working to support wind development for more than 12 years. But I also live in Reno County, and so I have what I think is a unique perspective to some of the things that you've heard today. I'm not going to read my testimony to you, but I want to draw your attention to a few things that happened many years ago to prepare Reno County for the wind development that many are hopeful we'll see now. Reno County began exploring wind energy more than 11 years ago with the creation of the Reno County Wind Energy Task Force. While the task force was not directly involved in bringing the Siemens Gamesa factory to Hutchinson, the work that the community did and the task force did leading up to Siemens really made it a place where they wanted to come and be part of. In 2008, the Reno County Wind Energy Task Force received the Governor's Award for Energy Education on Wind. Members of the task force, Siemens, the chamber, the county, the city, were instrumental in keeping the renewable portfolio standard in place for a number of years to allow the industry to grow and Kansas to see the benefits that it's had for the last decade. I want to remind you of this long history because some of the folks opposed to or those supporting this bill have indicated their concern that counties don't have the ability or aren't ready for this kind of development. And what I would say is folks who are new to the conversation or new to the counties where development is happening may not have a long understanding of the history that's gone into preparing the counties for this kind of opportunity that we see wind power as. I've attended personally, I've convened several meetings with folks who have concerns. I've attended several of the open houses, the county commission meetings, And I have to say I'm really proud of both the process that NextEra and the county have had to allow for an open dialogue, but also am pleased that they have really looked at the science and not been misled by anti-wind rhetoric that we have seen in other states that unfortunately has now come to Kansas. I want to briefly highlight that Reno County, where a lot of the opposition to wind is being heard from, has zoning regulations for commercial wind systems if you want to develop in a zoned area. The way it works in our county is you file a conditional use permit where you provide details about the project and information about the development. That kind of a conditional use process through the Planning Commission allows for approval on a case-by-case basis. It's not just a blanket, yes, everybody can come and develop wind. It's very specific to the conditional use. And that process allows for safeguards and the ability for the county to mitigate anything that might be a potential problem. The Planning Commission holds a public hearing. Public notification is made to all of the landowners in the proposed area within 1,000 feet of the project at least 20 days before a public hearing, so there's ample time for people to participate, to have their voices heard, to have their concerns heard. Once at the hearing, the applicant makes a presentation to the Planning Commission. They have an opportunity to ask questions, find out what their concerns are, talk about it. And then the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to either approve or disapprove the project. In Reno County, this allows for the county to decide what's best for them and to hear from all sides on the issue. Our county requires 2/3 majority for approval of a conditional use permit by the county commissioners. And so 2 out of 3, we only have 3 commissioners. The project that is in question in Reno County that you may have heard of, the Pretty Prairie Wind Farm, is actually in both the zoned and unzoned areas of Reno County. We have both within our footprint. And I was super impressed that NextEra said, we'll abide by all of the zoned regulations, even with turbines we're putting in the unzoned areas. So the thing I want to leave you with is some folks say, oh, this bill 2273 is not designed to kill the wind industry. But I have to tell you, I was at the Reno County Commission meeting where the commissioners voted not to put a moratorium on wind. And when the NextEra representatives were talking about the project and really saying, look, we want to be a good neighbor, but if you put on a moratorium, we're not going to be able to meet our deadlines. The folks in the room who were against that project clapped and said, good. So it may not be designed, or we may be saying it's not for that, but as the person being in that room, I have a much different perspective. You're going to hear from the Hutchinson-Reno County Chamber. I hope that you look at the written testimony from the Reno County Commission. As an advocate who's been working on these issues for more than a decade, I've seen the value that they bring to rural Kansans, to farmers and ranchers, to the environment, and I respectfully ask that you vote no on 2273. I'm happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. Our next conferee is Deborah Teufel, Hutchinson Reno County Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Vice Chair and committee members. My name is Deborah Teufel. I am the president of the Hutchinson Reno County Chamber of Commerce, and I thank you for allowing me to speak to you today on behalf of the 750 business members of our chamber, as well as our Greater Hutch Economic Development Partnership in opposition to House Bill 2273. Our chamber has long time adopted a public policy agenda that specifically supports wind energy. You heard some of that from Dorothy earlier. Wind energy is a key component of our economic development strategy at the local level in Reno County. I'm here today to really make 3 points about this bill and the effects that it could have on jobs and economic development in Reno County, as well as local authority. Reno County has worked diligently on behalf of wind energy over the last decade. The jobs that have been created at Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy since 2010 have proven vital to growing jobs in our local economy and helping keep Main Street strong. Today, Siemens Gamesa's nacelle assembly facility employs 300 high-paying jobs in our community. In response to ever-changing market conditions and their customer requirements, Siemens Gamesa recently invested millions of dollars to retool their facility, and they're currently rolling out a new production line for the HB2273 turbine platform. This was a very significant investment in that facility and in jobs in our community. Later this year, they intend to invest millions more in 2 new production lines for new models that are going to be in production in fourth quarter of 2019 and first quarter of 2020. This will position Hutch as a leading-edge facility with the latest technology. That the plant manager indicates to me that this bill could put in jeopardy those jobs in Kansas because Kansas is such an important market for this specific Siemens facility. So like I said, this would have very serious implications for primary manufacturing jobs and the Reno County economy in a whole. Our community cannot afford to lose more manufacturing jobs, nor can our state. Onerous setback laws in other states have effectively eliminated new wind farm development in those locations, and we can't afford for that to happen in Kansas. I asked Siemens to give me some specific examples, and it's in my written testimony, and they cite some legislation that was implemented in Ohio in 2014, and since then not a single new wind farm application permit has been approved in Ohio. So a setback magnitude that's proposed in this bill would likely bring all new wind farm development in Kansas to a halt, and it would pose a serious threat to an industry that has brought over $10 billion of investment to our state. Furthermore, adequate energy resources are essential for economic development. We see energy questions in every single economic development project that we work on, and we believe that any decision related to the development of new production facilities should take into consideration the ability for local governments to exercise local decisions. The memo in your packet that we also provided from Reno County Administrator Gary Meager also opposed this bill for a couple of reasons. Mr. Meager stated that KSA 12-741 is a comprehensive legislative enactment granting broad authority to cities and counties to regulate land uses within their respective jurisdictions. The Act provides for and authorizes the Planning Commission to make a comprehensive plan for the development of the unincorporated area of the county. As stated by Mr. Meager, a majority of Reno County Commissioners believe that land use regulation is best accomplished by local government entities. House Bill 2273 is unnecessary and an unwise intrusion upon that local authority that's already been conveyed to local government, and we concur with Mr. Meager's statement on that. Any attempt to pass this bill is a gross overreach to take away the local controls that exist. The Hutchinson Chamber believes that government works best when it's closest to those that it serves, and we support this preservation of local control. We discourage you from enacting laws that supersede the wishes of local government, and we ask that you please allow local governing bodies to enact our own reasonable setback policies rather than enacting a one-size-fits-all policy for Kansas. I visited with the leaders of Siemens Gamesa, and I visited with the leaders of NextEra Energy Resources.
It's too full. I'll give you a few more seconds to wrap up. You don't need to read it. If you just summarize it, that'd be great.
I would just say that they are responsible corporate citizens that are making a significant investment, and I ask that you oppose this bill because of the economic development implications it has for our state. Thank you very much, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Tufel. Our next conferee is Alan Kloss Anderson with Polsinelli Energy Practice Group. Welcome to the committee.
Vice Chair, ranking members, and then the rest of the committee, I want to thank you for the time to come here today. I also want to give a little background on myself and why I'm in really strong opposition here to this House bill. So I'm Alan Kloss Anderson. I'm a lawyer with the Colson Law Firm in our Kansas City office. I'm vice chair of our energy practice group. And as part of that, Colson is 900 lawyers in more than 20 offices across the country. We work on energy projects throughout those. And we work in energy projects in all types. We have interests in we work with clients with coal-fired power plant interests, oil and gas, and traditionally peace-based, as well as wind and solar developers and others. So we have kind of a broad range. We also, as a proud Kansan, work consistently with the state of Kansas on the recruitment of companies providing impact or input and things as relates to different policies that we see in the benefit of Kansas. For my testimony today, I do want to be clear. I'm going to be fairly blunt about this bill, and I'm going to get to the point as best I can on that. I hope you'll give me that deference. But as I get through this, I'll walk through the rationale behind it. But this bill takes away the local control that Kansas has decided long ago was important to be down at the local communities where their values and their goals could be achieved and analyzed. That can't be done by government fiat here in Topeka. It is impossible for this body to know, get the localized information required for those bodies to actually take into account their needs and their goals and their values. Additionally, this is an assault on property rights. There are times when that makes sense, but whenever we put in zoning, in this case, it's a complete taking of the wind resource. That is not the type of thing we generally do in Kansas. But when we do it, it's done at that local level, and I'll go through why we have controls in place there so that it can be done intelligently, with good research and diligence, because it is a taking of the property right that we protect by the U.S. and Kansas Constitution. Because when we take and we damage a property right, it implicates the U.S. and Kansas Constitution. So this bill, while on its surface seems like it's just putting setbacks in place, it should not be confused. This is a property rights issue, and it is an issue that implicates both the Kansas and the U.S. Constitution because of the due process. When we do that, we should do it intentionally, we should do it smartly, and we should do it well. This bill represents none of those things, and it certainly doesn't provide for an intelligent process to review it. So I'll go first, that the system of local control of land use is in the Kansas Constitution, where it says cities are hereby empowered to determine their local affairs of government. We also added statute for the counties in the County Home Rule Act that provides all acts in relation to the property concerns of the county necessary to exercise corporate or administrative powers are held at the county level. And the reason we do that is because nothing is more local than land use decisions. When land use decisions are done, they are based upon the local community's goals, values, decisions on their own nuanced land uses, as well as where they want to go with that. Shouldn't be understood. This can't be done at this body. It is done at the county level, so they can take the input from the local in a way that is sensitive to their needs. This does implicate that, and it takes away that local control, and that is something we have long valued here in Kansas. How do we do that? We do it through the Kansas Zoning Enabling Act. It provides a process where if we were going to harm people's property rights, and again, make no mistake, if we take away a use from that property based on, in this case, a setback that's not based on any legitimate or basis or an engineering or scientific, we are taking away economic use of that property. When we take away the economic use of that property by a citizen, we should do it intelligently. We should do it with great research and some severe look at this so that we don't do it in such a haphazard way as we're seeing in this bill, frankly. And 8 minutes isn't going to give me enough time to go through all the problems. So what I would say is I hope you will also have a chance to read the rest of my testimony that I provided to you, because this bill is flawed in more ways than just this. Okay, so we have to understand again why we did this in the state of Kansas. We put down local, and that's because we want the local communities to understand when they're harming their own citizen property rights, they're best positioned to know how to do with it. But even then, we are guarded, there are strictures upon even the local governments harming property rights. And because it implicates these things and it is an attack on free market capitalism. Professor Alkian, who is he was emeritus professor of economics at UCLA and one of the highly respected economists in the country, stated, one of the most fundamental requirements of a capitalist economic system and one of the most misunderstood concepts is a strong system of property rights. There's no question that this bill absolutely misunderstands property rights, economics, and is an assault on capitalist free markets. So if you further this bill, there's no question you have to understand you're implicating property rights in our free market system without nearly the analysis behind it that was warrant doing such a thing. Because as we look and we're harming property rights, fortunately, when I said the local is even restricted, it's because we have the U.S. and Kansas constitutions that specifically are very concerned about property right degradation. 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution says that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Section 18 of the Kansas Bill of Rights states that all persons for injury suffered in person, reputation, or property shall have remedy in due course of law. This does create a harm to the property, so only can we do that with great due process. The state of Kansas, we determined the way to do that due process was to give it to the states so they can include their local analysis of that. And so that deliberation process goes to that level. This process through state fiat overreaching down at the counties is not the way to provide due process, because we are harming property rights, and there's no question about that. And we are diminishing the free market capitalism that we have determined in the state is the best way to proceed. Make no mistake about this bill, it does those things. So we put that down to the local zoning, and we require them to have a comprehensive plan. We don't just say they can kind of put words on paper and just pass something. Because of the due process and constitutional implications, we require the counties to have a comprehensive plan and a process to adopt those zoning. And with that, they look at all their local uses. They do a determination as to what they think is the values of their community and how they should proceed. None of that is in place here. This overreach into the counties and the processes where we have decades and decades of process that have put in place to protect property rights is devoid in this process, and there's no way we should allow that to go forward. Because what this bill does is it substitutes this local knowledge with kind of bureaucratic fiat here and overreaching into the counties, which we've heard from the counties that are implicated here, and they've said, we don't want it. But more than that, we have 24 counties in the state that do have wind projects, and they have gone through this process. We don't have to guess what might happen in these. These are things that we should look at, and they can be done, and in fact, they are done at the county level. That's where these decisions have been analyzed, and as you heard here, we have Reno County that went through this process. We have Ford County, we have Pratt County. They are spoken here, and they said, we have looked at this. We've determined this is an incredible benefit to our counties. We should not let those who didn't like the result they received at their county commissions to do it through the state process when they have both the process and the remedy to do that at the state level. This bureaucratic fiat down to those counties taking over this control that implicates the Kansas Constitution and certainly is an assault on free market capitalism. You cannot proceed with this bill without knowing that you're doing those two things, as well as more harm to the entire system that we've held dear in Kansas when there's a process that already protects these people. I want to thank you for the time, of course, on the bed and for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Wake up, alarm. I think there was a miscommunication with my timer. The first time she holds up the card, there's 4 minutes left, and then the second time was 1 minute left. Correct, Renee?
Yes.
Okay, that's all right.
That's so that they would be able to.
So Ms. Tufel, I apologize. I think I got you with the first card up. So. Okay, our next conferee is Mike Kelly, Mayor of Roland Park, Kansas. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chairman, and thank you very much to the members of the committee for letting me share just a few thoughts with you today in opposition of House Bill 2273. Obviously, you just heard a very eloquent argument from Mr. Anderson about local control, and as mayor of one of Kansas's fine cities, I obviously advocate for local control, so I'll let that argument stand for itself. As a native Kansan, proud graduate of 2 of our educational institutions, Kansas State and then the University of Kansas Law School. And in case you ask, I will be cheering for the Wildcats on Monday night. Now that I know I've lost half the committee, I can continue. Well, good. Business is booming. So I'm very proud of that economic advantages that this wind industry has brought to our state, and obviously you've heard very eloquent arguments about that today, and so I'll let those stand for themselves. I wanted to give kind of a nuance from a Kansas City municipality's perspective on this bill, because make no mistake, this bill does affect all of Kansas's 105 counties. This bill does not only apply to western wind farms. It would apply to the opportunity of municipalities or businesses within Johnson and Wyandotte counties wanting to take advantage of powering some of their facilities with wind. These setbacks apply indiscriminately. Additionally, I'm one of a number of different elected officials that has formed a metro area climate action coalition to help us build resilience in the face of a changing climate. And I'll refer you to my written testimony for more information about that group. But really, it's of no mistake, even the fourth iteration of the National Climate Assessment from this current administration has said that the changing climate has an impact on our economy, on our national defense. And we in Kansas City have seen this. It's not necessarily just a coastal problem. Recently, a study was developed called the Climate Disruption Index that ranks metropolitan areas across the country based on how they are expected to face these changing climate impacts. Kansas City was ranked number 5 in the country. Number 5, based on increase of heat degree days, drought, and extreme weather like heavy rains or increased flooding. I know that we've all just experienced weekend winter number 6, and we keep going back and forth between our weather patterns. So the changing climate affects us all, even here in the heart of America. But this is not a trend without solutions. We can look at our neighbors. Kansas City, Missouri, in their municipal government was set a goal in 2008 of lowering their emissions productions. And they said by 2020 or 2030 even, we want to reduce our municipal operations by 30%. They crushed that and are already down by 40%. Yes, they did some energy efficiency projects, but the vast majority of that reduction was based on their city being increasingly powered by renewable sources and primarily by Kansas wind. This is an opportunity now that our utilities are giving to municipalities and to large customers, is to take advantage of the abundance of clean, renewable wind energy through direct renewable agreements. Westar made this available to large customers in their territory, and you look at the University of Kansas or Kansas State University, they're actually able to do their part to help a changing climate, but also they're saving money by these direct renewable agreements, by being powered through new Kansas wind. Now, KCP&L, or soon to be Evergy, is looking to do that same thing with the municipalities of the Kansas City metropolitan region. And as an elected official, I have a fiscal responsibility to my constituents to try to take advantage of this opportunity, not only to be able to budget out a fixed cost for energy, but to lock in that energy price and to save money for my constituents, while at the same time keeping our communities healthier, keeping them safer, and doing our part to help the changing climate. This bill, like you've heard from the industry leaders, is a de facto moratorium on new wind production. It would eliminate that possibility for these Kansas City municipalities that want to take advantage of this direct renewable opportunity. So I ask you to consider not only the local control arguments, not only the economic impacts, but also the somewhat unintended consequences that you're seeing throughout the state by this bill, which from top down is heavy-handed and I think a bit of over-regulation and really in contradiction of the wishes of the people of the great state of Kansas. Kansas is a leader in wind energy, and that it would uniquely consider going in the opposite direction of a national trend in reducing its commitment makes this a bill that I must oppose. And I hope you would join me in opposing House Bill 2273. I thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I'll be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Our next conferee is Christy Brown with the Kansas Chamber United for Business. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Committee members, thank you for allowing me to come before you today. My name is Christy Brown. I'm representing the Kansas Chamber of Commerce. You've already heard from so many industry leaders and representatives today. You've also heard from folks that represent interests in the environment. And the Kansas Chamber, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, often comes before you to talk about free market principles and how limited government is usually the best government. And in this particular instance, not only are we concerned about the impact this is going to have by dictating to your local governments how you expect them to govern. We're also concerned about the impact this has on an incredibly important industry that has grown in Kansas over the last several years and that has made huge investments in this state. As I said, you've heard from so many experts, and I'm not going to be able to add to the details, and I'm not going to be able to speak to the important constitutional legalities of this as well. But I want to leave you with this one thought. Every day in the hallway, every day in your committees, conversations and debates that you have on the floor here, I don't think a day goes by that I'm here that I don't hear many of you talk about how you can stem the outward migration of your constituents, especially from the rural communities. The wind industry has brought new jobs to communities that were afraid they were dying. They've created new opportunities for private property owners who might have had to sell their farm or their land because they had reached retirement age and they were unable to continue farming, or they were unable to continue to just keep up with the costs of maintaining their property. The wind industry has addressed several of these issues, and the growth of this industry, I believe, continues to help folks in our rural community stay where they want to stay. Keep the family farm if that's what they so choose, or even after they've gone away for their education or for training, come back home because there are new opportunities available to them. So I thank you for your time, and the Kansas Chamber encourages you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Our next conferee is Alan Albers, landowner, Kingman and Pratt counties. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you for having me today. Good morning, I'm Alan Albers from Cunningham, Kansas, and thank you for allowing me to speak about the HB2273 bill. And many of the ideas that I wrote up in here about landowners' rights, and that directly applies to us, that we lost the opportunity for wind towers or even the lines because of the opposition. So I think that's been pretty well covered, so I'll not spend much time with that. But then also it's been spoken of about the zoning. Kingman County calls their zoning board, Pratt County calls their planning board, but I think the locals need to be making the decisions, not those far away. But I also want to address something that hasn't been addressed, and that's the health issue. I read in the Hutch paper yesterday morning about the Tuesday hearings, and a young woman was concerned about the health of her children and her family. And I've been going to these meetings, even when BP first came, showed an interest in Kingman County. I set up a meeting in St. Bill, and we talked to them and their contractor, their suggestions were totally outlined. And so they changed right away. They were very cooperative, and some of the things that they had were unrealistic for the farmers. But most of these health issues that I've seen come up at all the opposition meetings, or meetings of the opposition, at the wind tower zoning meetings or county commissioner meetings or whatever. And I've looked them up online, and you can find a gob there, and they're all going to kill you. And the idea that, well, my family, my extended family, got 21 wind towers in Kingman and Pratt County. And the idea that either I or they would put people in jeopardy for wealth is totally offensive. And you can find everything you want to online, and you can see what it's done to our society recently, and I think it's totally ridiculous. And we thought, I've got 3 brothers, and they've all got wind towers within a half mile of their house. They've all got kids, they've all got grandkids, and if you think that they would jeopardize their family just for the income, that is totally offensive. I think we've been presented to the landowners that are in favor of it and willing to take them as these terrible ogres that are willing, or too selfish and greedy to say no to them, and that's not the case at all. Also, I met a number of the workers. I was a real pest when they were putting the wind farms in Kingman and Pratt County. I'm enamored by them. I love them. So I'm probably not a fair witness, but I love watching them. I watched them build them. I had to sign all kinds of sign-offs, so they keep telling me, sir, you're too close. You're gonna have to sign a paper so they got a bucket of them someplace. But anyway, and I met them and I talked to them, and I treated them like neighbors and friends, and I found out they're excellent people that NextEra and the other companies have hired. But I was amazed by how many of them actually lived in wind farms. That most of them, well, not most of them, a large percentage of them started working for these companies when their own family took land and took wind towers or lived in them. When they left our area, a big share of them went back to live back in wind farms. And if they were a health concern, I don't think they would be doing that. And then also, our middle son lives in Vermont now. And we go visit him, and when we leave, we take the Dartmouth bus to the Boston airport. And driving that bus route on the major thoroughfare, there are two wind towers identical to what these are inside the city limits of Boston. And they're both within 100 yards, one of a little mall and the other one within an apartment complex. If they were such terrible threats to people's health, I don't think you'd be finding them in Boston. So, in conclusion, I agree with everything else that's been said about we need to leave the control to the local areas, and I ask you to vote no on the HB 2273, and I will be around for a while if you like.
Thank you, Mr. Albers. Our last conferee is Zach Pastor with the Kansas chapter of Sierra Club. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Vice Chair, Chair, Ranking Minority, and members of the committee. Good morning. I'm Zach Pastor, a proud lobbyist for the Kansas Sierra Club. For those that don't know, the Sierra Club is the largest and oldest grassroots environmental organization, and our Kansas chapter is about 5,000 strong. Represents our state's strongest voice to enjoying, exploring, and protecting our great outdoors for more than 40 years now. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on House Bill 2273, the Wind Generation Permit and Property Protection Act. I think it's a very important topic concerning property rights, and certainly the Sierra Club has been very sympathetic over the years on property rights protections. In fact, the Kansas Sierra Club has advocated just in recent time a number of property rights protections that we'd like to echo. Last year we talked about the prospect of a third of 1 million chickens being at a quarter mile away from a home or 100 foot for a property line. We're concerned about the property damages coming from earthquakes resulting from oil and gas industry's wastewater disposal. We're concerned about taxing or putting a heavy fee on folks that want to put solar on the rooftop with their own money. We're concerned about the private property rights of folks wanting to put their land in a conservation easement. We're concerned about property rights when it comes to other nearby industrial developments such as animal feedlots, oil refineries, chemical and industry plants, fracking rigs, and more. So Sierra Club is definitely sentimental to the property rights issue, and that testimony on Tuesday we heard about people's rural quality of life is very concerning for us. But when it comes to wind development, we think that while wind development has social and environmental impacts, overall, we think wind industry has done a great job in reconciling these. For a long time, since 2010, for the Kansas chapter, we developed a fair and sensible policy in our mind that provides respect for landowners' property rights, public safety, and environmental sustainability. And I'll point out in my testimony some of the quotes from our direct position. We emphasize that nothing humans can do is without environmental consequences. And nationally, we echo that the Sierra Club believes that in most instances, while there may be environmental trade-offs to energy development, Negative impacts of wind can be managed, and actually the wind power substantially outweigh the wind's negative impacts. Our 2010 position lists out some of our criteria below. In the spirit of House Bill 2273, we recognize that there are important safeguards we feel industry is doing a great job of, but we spell out in our policy. I'll draw your attention that we think turbines should be at least 2,000 feet from residences. But 2,000 feet is a pretty reasonable setback in our minds. Federal aviation rules require specific lighting on turbines. We support that lighting should always be minimized for aesthetic purposes. That wind farms should be kept 5 miles away from important waterbird resting sites, 8 to 10 miles away from scenic byways that are officially designated. We oppose wind development in wildlife refuges, state parks, sacred lands, for example. We supported the Heart of the Flint Hills prohibition against wind development, and also for Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge. We expect wind developers should have minimal impact practices on the land and the environment, and especially with surrounding neighbors with the noise element. We feel that wind developers should have the responsibility to be good neighbors and work collectively to solve problems with the public. And we believe the local political process is the best avenue for resolving these wind issues, as local leaders have the direct tie to their constituents. But we feel that House Bill 2273 just goes too far in placing onerous limits on wind development, and too far of a setback compared to our 2,000 foot recommendation. In our view, the wind industry has done a great job in being fair, transparent, responsible, and inclusive in their siting and operation. And for the most part, we've begun to actualize this opportunity to benefit both economically and environmentally in contributing to our nation's energy supply while maintaining good community partnership and environmental stewardship at the local level. With current siting and wind sector's good practices, Kansas has been able to attract billions of dollars in economic investment and thousands of jobs created. In doing so, rural communities of Kansas have collectively gleaned millions of dollars in local lease payments and direct lease payments and local donations from wind companies without selling out the values of the land or the people that Kansas holds so dear. We feel that local government guidelines and stakeholder negotiations suffice for wind siting at this time. That said, if the legislature does indeed want to create a state law, if we feel that it is necessary to create maybe a floor for a setback distance, we would point you to that 2,000 foot setback per our 2010 position. The Kansas chapter, as a grassroots nonprofit, continues to be proactive as a fair broker between concerned Kansans, energy companies, and the natural environment, and we'll do so going forward. But above all, one of the last things I want to say to you, this is really important, that we encourage all lawmakers in concerned Kansas to realize that wind power represents not only advantageous, but a necessary enterprise for our state. We face a dire reality of extreme weather and climate volatility escalated by human-sourced greenhouse gas pollution. And I know we're sometimes reluctant to deal with this unfortunate fact, but this issue is way too important for our state, our biggest industry, agriculture, and too important for our kids and future generations of Kansas. We must embrace a unique opportunity, nay, obligation, to do what we can to urgently transition our nation's energy supply. While the impacts of climate change become ever so clear and dangerous, we must step up and make tough sacrifices. And in my testimony, I say, not since World War II has it been so crucial for the USA to help save the world. Our state's current role in cultivating clean and renewable energy is both of national and global importance in terms of carbon-free electricity production and mitigating global warming. In closing, while the Kansas Sierra Club holds dear the preservation of land, safety, and natural aesthetics of Kansas, House Bill 2273 goes too far in placing limits on vital wind development that's good for Kansas, environmentally and economically, good for our country, and good for the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pastora. That wraps up our opponents with oral testimony. I think you have a number of written testimonies in your packet, so review those at your will. I'll turn this back over now to Chairman Seiwert.
Thank you, Vice Chair. It's nice to have a warm seat. Okay, where are we at? We have some time for questions, so does anybody have some questions for Mr. Cox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to have you back. This question is for Kimberly Swati. Kimberly, towards the end of testimony, you were referencing maps, but ran out of time. Could you explain what these maps are for me?
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. So the maps included in your testimony, this is as it relates to private property rights. Per the bill 2273, there are no definitions specifically in the piece of legislation for what constitutes a local park or walk-in hunting. And so those are probably two of the biggest concerns. So say you have a landowner here that has bought 5 acres of ground, and if they don't sign the waiver, they don't return the waiver related to setbacks, then specifically they have the ability to control 4,521 acres. What happens within that radius? When you extend it out to the local park or the public hunting, they actually are controlling what occurs in 18,000 acres. And for those rural legislators, or I'm sorry, for more urban legislators, we're going to take the map of the Kansas State Capitol. So here's the center point is the Capitol. This is the portion of ground you own. Let's say you own 5 acres and you take 20 feet by 20 feet and you decide to turn it into a local park, because that's not defined in the bill, so you could do that. And now all of a sudden, you control what happens and the private property rights of any landowner, ranging from, again, the Kansas State Capitol, all the way out to McFarland Farms at 10th and Huntington, clear up to Highway 24, over to almost the interchange there at the I-70 Turnpike, and then down to 37th Street. So that's just a little bit for perspective. That's what those maps mean. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Representative Kiefer.
Kimberly. In your testimony, your final paragraph, you ran out of time, and I think that's an important paragraph of information to be heard by the committee. So if you could address that, please.
Sure, absolutely. The wind industry, we stand ready to talk to anyone, anytime, individuals, communities, certainly governors. We have a history of doing so. But this piece of legislation was crafted entirely in a vacuum. We had no input whatsoever in its creation. But we're all, as I said, we're always willing to talk, and we always are working to diligently improve the communications that we have with our landowners. But we truly do believe that this bill is a siren call for anyone looking to stop development in the state of Kansas, whether it's wind or the next megawatt of power or a transmission line or a new housing development in a rural area, biofuels facility. This is House Bill 2273 is the template on how you do that. Create setbacks that are so grand that they impede private property rights, and really they create no wiggle room allowing for any sort of development going forward. So I think that's probably the key point that the industry stands behind. Plus, aside from the private property rights, it usurps local control, and we do have a problem with that as well.
Thank you very much, and I have one more question for Alan Anderson. I have to tell you, your Posenelli, my son-in-law works for Posenelli in St. Louis. So,
Oh, great, yeah.
welcome to committee, but I'm caught up in your evaluation of the fact that this language is so vague and is drafted that it could create constitutional questions. Could you elaborate a little bit for me, please?
Yeah, it has a number of factors. So again, in my written testimony, I get into a myriad of factors. And so I'll start with the general premise. I mean, this bill is written so poorly, frankly, that it could not be passed. There's a number of things. One is it doesn't provide the constitutional protections of due process that are important when we do what it is clear what this would do, which is injure property rights. If we do that, we must have due process of law and those kind of things, both in the Kansas Constitution and the United States Constitution. Additionally, this just from a pure basis of some of the things you've heard mentioned, it creates terms that are not defined. What is the park? What is the walk and hunting area? What is the farm site? What is, all these different things, it is unable to determine what they are and where they would go from. And that kind of vagary doesn't allow for it to be enforced and doesn't allow for people to comply with it. So you have the first part, which is you have the constitutional challenge of just saying, did this provide due process? And I think, as you've heard, this was kind of done in a vacuum. It was provided here. It's certainly not written in a manner that I think this committee would want to move forward so that it goes forward in this state. Secondly, it literally includes terms that could not be enforced because they're so vague and not defined. I mean, literally not defined terms that are critical to even how this would be enforced and implemented. It doesn't exist. Additionally, it also has a provision here that states that a wind turbine would have no other lighting system than the one specified in here. This should be very clear. The state of Kansas is not the only party that has interest in lighting structures above 200 feet. If I go over in my testimony, that is the purview of the FAA. And the FAA determines how a system has lighting. And the reason they have that is because they are experts in what provides safety. This bill literally is written so recklessly, it states that's the only system that can be in place. Well, one, that's not enforceable. You could not do that because that's the purview of the FAA. Second, it should give you a sense of how reckless this is written. It literally provides for a system that is in its infancy from a technology standpoint, where it has been implemented in most cases has not been allowed to be used. And the reason for that is not because the FAA has some reason one way or the other, because it's not yet determined to be safe. But again, when you're looking at this bill, from all these things that have been vaguely written so that they can't even be enforced, you also have provisions that literally would create safety issues. That's the kind of thing that is intrinsic in the entirety of the bill. Shouldn't go forward for anyone who cares about the greater issues. If you care about property rights, free enterprise, a free market economy and capitalism, then you get to the flag. In fact, this can't be done.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back again.
Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I've got is probably more for the advisors, but I just want to go through a kind of list here. We heard from Kimberly Savati, talked about $10 billion in private investment in Kansas, more than 12,000 jobs, both in rural and urban. We heard from Bob Super, $2.1 billion in total investments, 1,700 jobs during construction, 70 jobs located in the state of Kansas full-time. Spencer Jenkins, 1,000 individual participating landowners, $8.5 million in payments to the individual landowners, including $1.5 million in Pratt County. Deborah Tufel, Reno County, 300 high-paying jobs with Siemens Corporation in the town. Mark Goodman, $21.9 million in total county property taxes and pilot revenue, $25.9 million in local school district revenue, $12.8 million in community college revenue, $63.6 million in property taxes. And yet, I hold in my hand a document from the Division of Budget signed by the Director, Larry Campbell, that stipulates this will have no fiscal effect. Who is wrong, who is right here? I'd really like to know some answers. I want some answers.
What was the question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These fiscal notes go to negative fiscal effects on that. In other words, what is it going to cost the state? That's nothing to do with what it produces for or the gross profits of it. It goes, what is it going to cost the state? In other words, hiring other people, full-time people, putting other category. I mean, it just goes for the negative effect to us. It has nothing to do with the fiscal. It has nothing to do with
Loss of taxes, loss of income.
No.
Loss of jobs.
well.
That's interesting.
Thank you. Representative Shears.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question goes out, there's been talk of if the tower goes away into contract and it's written that they'll be taken back down and done away with. There's money. When the contract is signed, and if any one of you could speak to that, to make sure that the representatives and the people here know that it's in a contract that they will be.
Yeah, yes, sir. I'll speak to that.
Thank you.
So the decommissioning language you're referencing, that's included in our easement agreement. That's the private agreement between ourselves and the landowner. Additionally, counties will often enter into a decommissioning agreement between the county and the developer. So there's often two forms of protection for the land.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Culbertson.
These questions will just be to anybody who would like to take them. This state kind of really isn't just a statement. This state really needs to grow. We're getting smaller every year. And as you said here, I wasn't part of the Tyson thing, but whether it's Tyson's and Turbines or whatever it is, there's always some reason that stuff doesn't come to this state. And some of the questions that have been that I've been getting is reference to the last question was the landowner told me that his contract he'd be responsible to pay for the taking the tower down up to about $250,000. So that's right or wrong.
Yes, that's wrong. That's incorrect.
So, does anybody have anything to speak today of what the wind projects do to property evaluation?
A study was recently done, and this is, I didn't have the official document in order to put this in my testimony, but a study was just concluded, and I received a copy of it on Monday morning, and it was an assessment of, twofold assessment. One, first of the 21 counties that have an operating wind farm, they contacted the county appraisers and did a full discussion with the county appraisers talking about property valuation. And then they also did a comparison, and I'm pulling it out right now, with all of the assessors in county in Kansas that have operating wind farms, and then in like states, so Iowa, Illinois, South Dakota. And to this point, and this is a direct quote, for agricultural properties that host wind turbines, the additional income from the wind lease may increase the value and marketability of those properties. The county assessors in the 21 Kansas counties, quote unquote, there was no market evidence to support a negative impact upon residential property values as a result of the development of or proximity to a wind farm, and there was no reductions in assessed value. Another quote from the county appraiser from this study: the past 18 months, county appraisers have not experienced a real estate tax appeal based on wind farm concerns. There have been no reductions in appraised valuations related to wind farms. And I can get you that data. I unfortunately did not have it when the testimony was due 9 a.m. Monday morning, but I can get that to you.
The last question. Sorry. So the other question that while we're sitting here today that came in was if an adjacent landowner does not have a wind farm, but does the industry have the right to eminent domain across his property without any recourse from the landowner?
Correct. That's an excellent question. In 2005, the Kansas legislature passed a bill that says that a wind facility, whether it's the turbine, the transmission line, anything related to the wind facility does not have the right of eminent domain. It is not a public utility. Everything that is done to build a wind farm has to be done via willing landowners. So you can go across Kansas, and the project that's in our neck of the woods in Smoky Hills Wind Farm, you can see that there are 30 miles worth of turbines, but there is a pocket for several miles where there is not a single wind turbine, and that is because those landowners did not willingly enter into that contract, and there was no right of eminent domain.
Thank you, Phil, for asking all the questions.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Dorothy Barnett may be able to answer these, although it's open to anybody. But going back to process and procedure is important to me. Make sure I understand the information. But in Kansas, I can go to anywhere in the state, and zoning will either be in place or not in place. That's the zoned or unzoned areas we were talking about.
Right, so that's at the county level.
Right.
And I can speak only specifically to Reno County, as that's where I've lived and have been associated, and part of it is zoned and part of it is unzoned.
And so my question with that, if a county's on their A game and they want to be open for business and wind friendly, they could zone it in advance or bring in your wind farms. That's an option.
Which is what Reno County did with a lot of their already commercial wind development.
And then if they're perhaps not pre-approved for wind energy, that's what I understand the conditional use permit would be for. It would be an exception to the zoning laws that are in place.
That's not the case in Reno County. In Reno County, the conditional use permit is the process. I would invite Spencer or Alan to talk more about that statewide.
My general concern, just to make sure, but there is a process in place. If it's not already pre-approved, then landowners, whether it's health concerns or setback requirements or property values, any number of things, they're going to have notice and an opportunity in these zoned areas to come to their local officials. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so in the system of zoning, first the counties have the opportunity to elect, do they want to be zoned or do they not want to be zoned? So that's kind of the first, that's part of the process, and so that's actually a choice. Counties have made a decision either to or not, or in the case of like Reno County, partially be or not partially be. In any case, if they choose to be zoned, and whether or not there is specific wind energy provisions, many do have, often they also have it as part of the conditional use process, even as contemplated use. So there's contemplated use, but with the process. Even if it doesn't have that, there is a process for public input, hearing, and that kind of thing, so that the public gets that opportunity. They also have an opportunity at the time of the application to do something and alter their zoning regulations at that point, should they decide that was beneficial to them. Because that's the point, is at the local level, they make that determination. Does their values, their desire, those things, they do it in advance, or they can do it at the time of the application.
My last question, if I may, Mr. Chair, to help me explain to my constituents, I think I've got the zoning areas down. I don't yet have the unzoned areas figured out. If somebody could help me what that looks like.
Thank you, Representative, for that question. That was exactly the point that I was hoping we would get the opportunity to make as well. In an unzoned area, a developer still has to negotiate, not only with the landowners, but a developer still has to negotiate with the county for decommissioning, for road maintenance, and for the county contribution agreement. So those three agreements are the opportunity for the county, in an unzoned county, to have final approval authority over whether or not a wind farm is actually going to come to a community. So if the county doesn't sign off on either one of those three agreements, even though the county is not zoned, the wind project will not move forward if they do not sign on the dotted line on one of those three agreements. And there are negotiated agreements between the developer and the counties.
In the first one you said decommissioning. What's decommissioning?
Yes, my apologies. Decommissioning is what happens at the end of the useful life of a project, and how those towers will come down and how the ground will be remediated.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're running short of time because we have to open the hearing here, but I'm going to let you, who I have, but keep it short and quick. Representative Keith.
Kimberly, again, we've got a lot of new people on this committee that don't understand a lot of what the process of where you go through. Would you just elaborate, first of all, addressing, we've heard 40 to 90 years on a contract. If you could address the length of the contract that is normal for people to sign, and what a pilot is.
Okay, so I have, we have the two of the developers are here in the room, and so I can definitely talk to you about the type of pilot, and then I can have the developers talk about their contracts. So the wind farm is a form of electric generation, and all forms of electric generation, with the exception of a nuclear facility, have a 10-year property tax exemption. So a wind farm does not pay property taxes for the first 10 years that it is it's operational. And then on year 11, it does go on the state property tax rolls. That said, it is also the only industry that essentially pays a payment in lieu of taxes to the county for those first 10 years, or previously when it was under a life of the project exemption, it was for the life of that project. So that is what the payment in lieu of taxes agreement is. And again, it is negotiated between the developers and the counties. The counties then take that money. The county commission has their discretion to use the money how they best see fit for their community. And then if it's okay, I'll have the developers talk about the specific contracts.
Representative Timmons?
Thank you. Oh, go
We've
ahead.
got to get through these. If I can cut the questions off or whatever, how you want to do it. I'd like to let the representatives ask the questions.
Mine's easy and quick. In Kingman County, we've talked about the property value and stuff, but just going to throw this in here for the group to hear here. There's 3 new homes and one of them being built now, and 2 of them were built since the wind farm came. I don't think that. I'm sure in some areas it would devalue property, maybe, but in our area we're seeing growth, and it hasn't changed. These are young people moving back and contributing to our community, so just wanted that to be out there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Darden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kimberly, I have a question concerning the pilot program. The wind industry parks that have been built prior to a certain time, they have a lifetime exemption for property tax, is that correct?
For the life of the project. So life of the project
50 years.
The life of the project is usually 20 to 25 years.
Plus an extension of another.
And then at that point, after the initial 20 to 25 year period, then there will be a conversation between all the landowners and between the county. And if the developer is able to secure another PPA, power purchase agreement for that particular project, then there will be a discussion again with those landowners and with the counties. Are we going to move forward with repowering the project? In which time that would be considered a new project and would go on the tax rolls at year 10 or year 11.
10-year abatement. So these have depreciation values, right?
They do.
Are they on a 5-year depreciation value?
It's a 7-year straight
7 years.
depreciation.
So explain to me, if you have a 10-year tax abatement and you depreciate out in 7 years, how are we going to get any tax off that?
I would be more than happy to have either one of the developers ask you about that.
Thank you.
And then there's the contract line.
Yes, so at the end of that 7-year straight line depreciation is a 20% floor. So 20% of the assessed value remains throughout the life of the asset.
Okay, so what I understand is you have $1 million tower approximately to build, correct? There's a property value of $1 million. In 7 years, it's down to $200,000.
Times the 25% assessment rate. So there's the assessed value and there's the assessed rate.
Okay. But okay, I got it. Thank you.
One last question, Representative Lowe. Real quick.
Yes, sir. Just to address the contract length, we have the term for the lease is 50 years, and then there are 2 options to extend that. The reason being is these projects often get repowered, and what that means is we'll actually go in and upgrade the equipment up tower and extend the project life. So that's the reason for the lease term.
Last question. Quickly, Representative Warren.
Much pressure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No pressure.
Real quickly for Mrs. Fati, you said there were 21 counties that currently have wind projects.
Yes.
And then I don't see the list in your testimony. Is Johnson County one of those?
No, Johnson County is not one of those. And again, I do have the listing of the counties that do have wind farms, and I apologize, I'm going to get you the appraisal information, but I will also give you this map. This is the map put forth by Kansas Department of Commerce, and that lists all the counties with wind farms.
And is Johnson County a good potential future placement of wind projects or not?
Honestly, there probably will not ever be a wind farm developed in Johnson County. It's just too population dense. However, county governments and cities and within Johnson County could certainly procure Kansas wind by way of agreement with one of the other operating wind farms.
But probably not put,
They won't put it, not a large scale wind farm. You may have some micro towers, in some instances, but a 200 megawatt wind farm will never go will not go in Johnson County.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question for one of the advisors, Nick. There was a question brought up about my input in this bill. Did I give you any direction or any legislative action on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, no, you did not.
Thank you. Did any of the other advisors, did I contact any of the other revisers on any input on this bill?
That was directed to me, no.
Very good.
Thank you, Chairman. You did not contact legislative research that I'm
Okay,
aware of.
thank you. This is for the record. I've been the chair 8 years. I've been in office 11. There was some emails sent out by lobby groups, and I have a report here from the record. And I have the copies of the emails that was sent by a college professor to everybody on this committee. I have it copied and everything. So there's no question that my involvement in this was charged, that I was the main drafter of this bill. For the record, one of my favorite phrases in the legislature is, "Your word is all you really have here." We serve in an arena where trust and integrity are the things that allow us to work together to get things done. I take that very seriously. That's why I'm talking here. I allowed HB 2273 to have a hearing to be worked because I believe part of our job is to consider ideas, even ones we might disagree about. In the case where Kansas, who are concerns, have come to us on issues, I believe their concerns deserve a hearing. Unfortunately, there was someone who attempted to misuse my credit, had the discretion to question my credibility, and to try to convince others that 2273 was, quote, my bill. Introduced to serve some self-interest on my part that was sent to a professor who has credibility. That in turn sent that out, that this was my bill. I have copies of that that will go into the record. That is a false statement. It is not my bill and never has been my bill. I had no input whatsoever with any of the drafters of the bill. I referred them to the revisor's office. I had calls back home from people in my district that said I was the revisor or the drafter of this bill. That is false. I want that on the record. This bill was not drafted by my request, and it was not introduced in my effect on my property or my personal gain or any sort of advantage, or any comment, email, or implication to this is contrary and wrong. I have never seen that contact as a chairman. We may disagree on the merits of the bill, but we have the proper to make allegations and damaging someone's reputation because of those disagreements are not correct. So with that, I would like to have that introduced into the record. And I'm sorry, it makes me a little nervous because when it hits my home front on this here, by people calling me government that said I crafted this bill, I'm not happy. So anyway, we're going to close the hearing on this now. We're going to try to move to work in final action on bills previous heard, which will come to HB 2084, amended Kansas 911 Act. Would you like?
Don't worry, yesterday, he stopped by a buy about looking for a filter. Got a call from the one guy that said he didn't ship it. Where's that, I guess?
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to bring this bill up to Representative Cox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we pass HB 2084 out of committee favorably.
Are there any amendments for that, Representative?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm still a little nervous because I've never been.
I'm sorry, I don't know the proper procedure since this is my first time.